This is John Fisher of North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I listen to the International Radio Report every Sunday morning at 10:30 on CKUT 90.3 FM in the fair city of Montreal.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, August the 10th, 2025, here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. My name's Sheldon. I'm here with Jill. We are here every Sunday morning with our 30 minutes of news from the world of radio for you. We have some fairly lengthy stories today from different parts of the world, so I think we should get going on these right away. We'll have all of our contact information for you at the end of the show. So, Gilles, you came up with an interesting situation involving a station here in Quebec and our governing body of broadcasting in Canada.
Yep, the CRTC could be sued over an online radio station that has sparked indignation in Quebec. This is by Antoine Trepanier of the National Post. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, is taking so long to decide whether Quebec's online radio station can continue to broadcast on 99.5 FM in Montreal that Cogeco Communication is threatening to sue the federal agency to speed things up. In a letter sent Monday to the CRTC's Secretary General and obtained by National Post, Cogeco accused the Commission of not ensuring the proper progress in the file, not assuming the responsibilities incumbent upon it, and not fulfilling its duty towards the public and the Canadian broadcasting system. Moreover, it states that both companies involved in broadcasting the station are operating in an illegal situation. Québécois replied in its own letter on Wednesday, accusing Cogeco of making false and defamatory statements about Québécois media, baselessly accusing it of multiple violations and of operating illegally. It all started a year ago when Québécois, Quebec's largest media empire and owner of powerful news outlets such as Le Journal de Montréal and TVA, announced the broadcast of its Cube digital radio programs on 99.5 FM, owned by Leclerc Communications. The deal raised some eyebrows at the time in the industry. When it launched Cube Radio in 2018, Québécois announced it was the new way to do radio. The company had long been aiming for a breakthrough in Montreal's lucrative and cutthroat radio market. In fact, the CRTC had already blocked Québécois from entering the Montreal radio market in the past. In 2008, it prohibited single companies from owning newspapers, television, and radio stations in the same market. So Québécois turned to an unregulated digital platform. Until August 2024, when Cube's most popular talk radio shows then became available on a conventional weekday radio frequency, resulting in the demise of music stations Weekend or WKND 99.5 FM. This was without requiring regulatory approval. This agreement is solely a programming agreement providing for live, simultaneous rebroadcast of the Cube radio station's programming on the 99.5 FM frequency, Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., said Québec's Vice President and Regulatory and Environmental Affairs, Peggy Tabbitt, in a letter to the CRTC. Leclerc Communications' license stipulates that it is required to broadcast a majority of hours of French-language vocal music on weekdays. The company claims to be meeting its obligations, but the CRTC recently challenged this claim in a letter after receiving complaints. Quebec's music industry criticized the change, while competitors argued that the move was outright illegal. Cogeco and Bell Media, the two most important players in the market, asked the CRTC to enforce its regulatory requirements regarding concentrated media ownership and wants the Commission to recognize that the agreement between Québécois and Leclerc contravenes the CRTC's multimedia ownership policy and that it issues an order prohibiting Québécois and Leclerc from broadcasting the programming of Cube Radio in prime time. Since the complaint was filed, stakeholders from across Canada have taken an interest in this matter, generally in favor of Cogeco and Bell. As a smaller market private broadcaster operating AM and FM radio stations across the prairies, these developments are concerning to Golden West. If the Commission fails to act, it will shake the confidence of broadcasters in the fair, transparent, and timely enforcement of the rules and regulations governing our private broadcasting system. Gordon Ralston from Ralco Radio in Saskatchewan also supported Cogeco. On the other hand, Quebec Media firmly believes that the programming agreement is in the public interest of Quebecers and promotes diversity by adding a new voice to over-the-air radio in a largely globalized news market. Our position on this matter has been clear and consistent since the day this agreement was publicly announced. We rigorously comply at all times with all of our regulatory obligations and licensing conditions, said Leclerc Communication spokesperson Stéphanie Fries. The application was filed in November and comments officially opened in December. Since then, the CRTC has received a series of extension and confidentiality requests from multiple parties, added Cameron. But Cogeco's patience is running out. In the letter obtained by National Post, Paul Colling, the company's chief legal and corporate affairs officer, writes that competitors are losing revenue because of this business agreement and that the CRTC is taking too long to act. This inertia is unfounded, unreasonable, and arms the entire Canadian media ecosystem, while Québécois and Leclerc continue to blatantly ignore the regulations put in place by the Commission. The CRTC did not respond to National Post's questions regarding a possible lawsuit. If the regulator does not issue a decision within 30 business days, Cogeco intends to file an application for a writ of mandamus with the Federal Court of Appeal, which would speed up the process and force a decision from the CRTC. As the Council shirks its obligations on responsibilities, this legal avenue seems particularly opportune to us, wrote Colling. Meanwhile, Québécois is asking the CRTC to categorically and expeditiously dismiss the baseless application to prohibit Québécois Media and Leclerc from broadcasting Cube content on 99.5 FM. So there's a few things in there. There's, first of all, you need to put the guidelines of what's legal and illegal and the way the broadcasts are going right now, because that's not clear. And what are the boundaries of the what's possible in renting, for example, airtime on a station with some programming, which is not owning a station. So all of that needs to be decided, and I understand these big companies also saying, look, it's taking too long. If it's causing some kind of financial issue here, well, maybe we have a right to sue if the federal agency doesn't act fast enough.
It seems that the 99.5 station is more or less, according to their terms of license, are supposed to be doing predominantly music.
Yep.
So that's one thing that they're attacking is, well, why are they putting all this news programming on? But like you said, if a station decides, is there money changing hands here for one thing? Are they paying to put that programming on that radio station to the owners of that station? That we don't know either. So there's a lot of things we don't know here. It's obviously competition. They're battling it out between the companies as to, is it popular? Do we know how popular Cube Radio is?
Cube Radio Online is quite popular, and because it's often referenced. But I remember that when we talk ratings, which are barely a little bump in the ratings in Montreal.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. We'll have to watch. First off, does CRTC respond in a suitable amount of time? Our next story is a major story. We've been talking about the U.S. government cutting the funding to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Well, they have responded. And this comes to us from Paul McLane at Radioworld. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting will close its operations on September the 30th of 2025. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting has announced plans for an orderly wind down of its operation following passage of the federal rescissions package and the release of a Senate Appropriations Committee funding bill for fiscal 2026. In a landmark outcome resulting from President Trump's efforts to end public media funding as being unnecessary in 2025, and his criticisms of NPR and PBS as biased and exclusionary, it is an outcome that has been sought by some Republicans for many years, but without success until now. CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, noted that the new funding legislation excludes money for CPB for the first time in more than 5 decades. CPB was created by Congress in 1967 to be the steward of the government's investment in public broadcasting. It supports operations from some 1,500 local radio and TV stations. For nearly 60 years, CPB has carried out its congressional mission to build and sustain a trusted public media system that informs, educates, and serves communities across the country, it said in a statement. Through partnerships with local stations and producers, CPB has supported educational content, locally relevant journalism, emergency communications, cultural programming, and essential services for Americans in every community. CPB informed its approximately 100 employees that the majority of the staff positions will end on September 30th. President and CEO Patricia Harrison was quoted in the announcement. Despite the extraordinary efforts of millions of Americans who called, wrote, and petitioned Congress to preserve federal funding for CPB, we now face the difficult reality of closing our operations. A small transition team will remain through January, working on compliance, final distributions, and resolution of long-term financial obligations, including matters involving music rights and royalties. CPB said its board and management are working to address the legal, financial, and operational requirements of the closure. In an order issued in May by President Trump, he wrote that, unlike in 1967, when the CPB was established, today the media landscape is filled with abundant, diverse, and innovative news options. Government funding of news media in this environment is not only outdated and unnecessary, but corrosive to the appearance of journalistic independence. At the very least, he continued, Americans have the right to expect that if their tax dollars fund public broadcasting at all, they fund only fair, accurate, unbiased, and nonpartisan news coverage. No media outlet has a constitutional right to taxpayer subsidies, and the government is entitled to determine which categories of activities to subsidize. The CPB's governing statute reflects principles of impartiality. The CPB may not contribute to or otherwise support any political party. The CPB fails to abide by these principles to the extent it subsidizes NPR and PBS. Which viewpoints NPR and PBS promote does not matter. What does matter is that neither entity presents a fair, accurate, or unbiased portrayal of current events to tax-paying citizens, Trump wrote. Here is some additional background info about what CPB does. While American public media are locally based, CPB is the largest single source of funding for public radio, television, and related online and mobile services, according to its website. About 70% of its annual appropriation went to local stations, but as CPB's website states, by design, it's not the only source. Public media's strength is that its funding comes from many sources, including listeners, viewers, and major donors. CPB does not produce or distribute programs. PBS is a private, nonprofit owned by its member public television stations. It distributes programming to about 350 stations and is funded principally by member stations, distribution revenue, and underwriting. CPB provides grants to PBS for some of its national content and for the infrastructure that distributes content and emergency alerts from PBS to public stations. NPR is a nonprofit membership organization of separately licensed public radio stations. It produces and distributes news and other programming. It is principally funded by member stations, distribution services, underwriting, and institutional grants, and individual contributions. One of the many questions that industry observers will be watching is how the pending closure of CPB will affect those infrastructure aspects of what NPR and PBS do. So this is a major shock to the system of the NPR radio stations and the PBS television stations. And we're already seeing all kinds of stories coming from different parts of the country of what stations are trying to do to keep their heads above water. There are already a few stations that we've seen stories about that are probably going to close down unless something really major happens and support comes, as you said, from companies or members of the public, or maybe large donations from supporters who have supported these stations over the years, who may want to try the best they can do to keep them going. But it's going to be difficult times ahead for sure.
In our next story, outrage as Nigerian governor shuts down independent radio station in Nigeria. This is by Maimuna, Raji, Egigogo, Premium Times via Radioworld. A political storm is raging in Niger state over the shutdown of an independent media outlet, Badegi FM Radio, Mina, on the order of Governor Umar Bago. Mr. Bago had directed the State Commissioner of Police and Commissioner for Homeland Security to seal the media outfit having been unhappy with its broadcasts. The governor also directed the license to be confiscated and the owner profiled. The chief press secretary to the governor, Bolodi Ibrahim, in a statement issued on Friday, said the governor gave the directive during the expanded Niger State All Progressive Congress, APC, caucus meeting held at the Government House, Mina. According to Mr. Ibrahim, the decision was taken because of the daily activities of the radio station. Governor Bago also accused the owner of the station of incitement of the people against the government and directed that the license of the radio station be revoked. The governor directed the Commissioner for Homeland Security and the Commissioner of Police to seal the radio station, emphasized the need for the security operatives to profile the owner of the radio station as his station promotes violence, Mr. Ibrahim said. Reacting to the governor's order, the director of operations of Badegi FM, Abubakar Shaib, implored the governor to channel his complaints through the proper channels rather than directing security operatives to harass the owner and staff of the radio station. The right thing to do is to write to the National Broadcasting Commission, the NBC, for investigation. NBC has a schedule of our programs, and we are being monitored every day. So the governor should write to NBC and let the regulatory agency verify our contents and program to establish if they contravene any of the NBC codes or ethical provisions. We cannot do anything to undermine the public peace and security of the state. Our duty is to hold leaders accountable, and that is what we are doing. We don't have anything against any individual or state government, he said. This is not the first time journalists and the media have been assaulted under the current administration in Niger State. In November 2023, 6 months after assuming office, the Commissioner for Homeland Security, Bello Mohammed, a retired Army Brigadier General, was said to have assaulted and attempted to seize the recording equipment of a Voice of America reporter, Mustafa Batsari. Mr. Batsari disclosed that he had called the commissioner several times via telephone without a response, adding that he went to his office but did not meet him. He had decided to approach the official in Government House to get the government's side on the report he was working on, but the commissioner rained abuse on him and attempted to seize his recording equipment. It took the intervention of people around. The commissioner in charge of security threatened my life and tried to seize my recording, Similarly, in January 2025, the state correspondent of the People's Daily newspaper and chairman correspondence chapel of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, Yakubu Bina, was held for several hours by the State Security Service over a report he did on banditry. Mr. Bina was also held for several hours with his mobile phones seized for 3 days at the State Criminal Investigation Department of the police for allegedly sharing an article critical of the special advisor to the governor on print media, Aisha Wakaso. The police action followed a direct criminal complaint filed against the reporter at the Mina Magistrate Court by the plaintiff, who alleged that the defendant circulated the article on WhatsApp groups without verifying its authenticity. Many residents of Niger State, including members of the ruling APC and civil society organization Amnesty International and a Mina-based CSO, the accountability ambassadors, have condemned the decision of the governor, describing it as an attempt to suppress freedom of expression. Amnesty International said targeting independent media was aimed at depriving the people of the opportunity to receive fair and objective reporting of issues affecting their lives. Amnesty International strongly condemns the lawless and repressive order issued yesterday by Governor Umar Bago of Niger State for the closure of Badegi FM, 90.1 FM, Radio Mina, which is an independent source of news for the people of Niger State. The governor's allegation against the radio station of inciting violence and his reckless order that the license of the radio station be revoked clearly show abuse of power and unacceptable intolerance of critical voices. The order for the closure of the radio station is misguided and unjustifiable, while bandits and insurgents are ravaging the Niger state through killings and massive displacements of rural communities, with both the federal government and Niger state failing to protect lives. Pointing accusing fingers at a radio station clearly shows a failure of leadership. Attacking Badegi FM is part of a wider pattern of attempts to create a climate of fear across newsrooms in Nigeria and to make it harder for journalists to do their jobs. Governor Bago must immediately withdraw his unlawful order. Under Nigerian laws, the governor has no power to order the closure of a radio station. Choosing to bizarrely blame a radio station for the inexcusable security failures of the government is an open attack on the media freedom. It said similarly Muhammad Alfa Muhammad, the Speaker, accountability ambassadors, asked the governor to respect the Nigerian constitution that grants citizens the freedom of expression. The order by Governor Umaru Bago to shut down Badegi FM radio and call for the revocation of its license raises serious constitutional, ethical, and democratic concerns. While the need to maintain public peace is legitimate and indeed paramount, the outright closure of a media house without due process sets a dangerous precedent, one that threatens press freedom and undermines Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution, which guarantees freedom of expression and the press. So a complex situation developing there.
Yeah, and we've had a story recently about Nigeria wanting to return to shortwave. I wonder what the programming will be that they'll want to put out to the rest of the world if they're trying to shut down things that they don't like within their own country. Someone's going to want to probably control what goes out over that international service. So, yeah, we've seen this happen in many countries, and it will continue to happen, I'm sure.
So what's happening with our sun? Well, our sun is getting more active as the number of sunspots, especially big sunspots that harbor the energy for solar flares, is increasing. So there could be a lot of activity this week that could happen. The sunspot number is 150, the solar flux 151. And to witness all of the possible activity from the sun coming this week, you do need a radio, and you need to turn it on.
Hi, I'm Eric Cottrell of Lynn, Massachusetts. I get my weekly radio news on the International Radio Report on CKUT 90.3 FM in beautiful Montreal.
We have a short item about European radio listening reach is at 82%, but time spent listening is declining. This is via Radio Info Africa and the European Broadcasting Union. The latest European radio listening report has been released by the EBU, showing radio's reach is still massive, although time spent listening is slipping. The vast majority of Europeans are reached by radio every week. Weekly reach stands at 82.8% in 2024, down 2.3 percentage points from 5 years ago, and down 0.8 percentage points from 2023. Year-on-year declines were recorded in 21 of the 28 markets analyzed. In 18 of these, the decreases were slight, remaining below 2 percentage points. In 2024, weekly radio reach among youth stood at 73%, representing a 5 percentage point decline compared to 5 years ago. The year-on-year drop of 1.5 percentage points was more pronounced than that observed in the total population. This decline was driven by sharp decreases in a few markets, alongside more moderate decreases in most others. Time spent listening is 2 hours, 14 minutes in 2024. That's down 13 minutes on 5 years ago and 2 minutes on 2023. While year-on-year declines were often modest, they were remarkably widespread, occurring in 20 of 24 markets analyzed. Among youth, listening time was 1 hour 13 minutes, down 17 minutes on 5 years ago and 2 minutes on previous year. In 2024, public service media's weekly reach was 43%, a decline of 2.1 percentage points compared to 5 years earlier. Public service media held a daily market share of 36.4%, marking a year-on-year decline of 0.5 percentage points. 58% of public service media's main radio stations are the top station in their market, and in 94% of markets, it ranks in the top 5. In the survey methodology, radio audience trends are benchmarked across countries using common metrics of time spent, reach, and market share. The full radio market is presented using time spent listening and weekly reach data. The performance of public service media radio services is presented using weekly reach and daily market share. So it's still strong, but it is slipping, particularly in certain age groups in Europe. But radio is still a vital source for many, many people.
I wonder if the time spent listening goes probably with the fact that we've noticed that the younger generation today, the attention span is not the same. So they tend to want to have shorter, quick information rather than lengthy, documentary style stuff.
Yeah, it could be that, or they could be tuning in wanting to hear certain things and not hearing what they want to hear. So time spent listening was shorter as well. Basically, maybe they didn't like what they were hearing.
That's possible.
So a lot of different factors to put into those numbers, I guess.
There's one amateur radio contest coming up.
Yeah, we'll mention this one quickly for you. The North American QSO Party, single sideband, 1800 Zulu August 16th to 0559 Zulu August 17th, is organized by the National Contest Journal. Any amateur radio licensee may enter, and the object is to work as many North American stations as possible during the contest period. It's the standard 160 through 10 meter bands only, no work bands, and the mode is SSB. So there'll be a lot of activity on the bands with the people working American ham operators next weekend. So check that out.
And we are out of time.
We thank you for tuning in. If you want to reach us with any questions or comments, our email address is radioreport@yahoo.com. Our show is live streamed and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group has 984 members. It is called International Radio Report. We invite you to check it out. And our YouTube channel gives you all of our shows to listen to at times that are convenient for you. Go to youtube.com/@IRR. Thank Thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you again next week here on CKUT for the next edition of the International Radio Report. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.